Good morning. It is Saturday, June 7th, and I'm here to read the Clermont Sun so you don't have to. And it's the June 5th edition of the Clermont Sun. And let me get it up here. I didn't connect it correctly before we start, so let me just give me a second here, and I will pop it up on the screen. And so here we go. Here is the Clermont Sun for this week, June 5th. I think the press deadline would have been June 3rd, Tuesday, June 3rd. And it is again 12 pages, and I will cover it in the Jungle Gyms ad, the best part of the Clermont Sun. And actually, at first, when I read this, I thought, whoa, this is like a better Clermont Sun than usual. And of course, the sports section is always fantastic in here. My hats have been off for a long time to the gentleman that does the sports section. It's really the only reason to buy this paper if you're into high school sports. But it's a lot cheaper just to get it online. But anyway, let's zoom in and get rolling here. Well, starts out with what I'd call the dumbest headline story of all. I think I've been doing this maybe 12 weeks now. By the way, I'm not going to do it next week, Saturday. I can't do it this upcoming Saturday. So there's going to be at least a week off in this. So you're going to have to read the Clermont Sun on your own, I guess, or I'll see if I can do it in some way. I just have a conflict on Saturday morning. So the headline story here is Milford City Council proposed amendments to city charter, and then read the story. That tells you absolutely nothing. Zero. Zip. It actually says the Clermont Sun will highlight some of the notable proposed amendment changes in next week's edition. I mean, the headline story says nothing, zero, and just tells you it's going to have a story next week. This is how bad this paper is. This is how ridiculous. If you picked up the paper on the newsstand because the headline was Milford City Council proposes amendments to city charter, you would feel like, what? What did I pay for? I just paid $1.50 for a paper where it teased me with the headline of Milford City Council proposed amendments to city charter, and then didn't have anything on it. Nothing. Okay. It just said it's an article. The headline article says we're going to have an article next week. It's embarrassing. You should get a refund. You should contact Megan Alley for a refund if you bought this paper at the newsstand because of the headline. And I'm not quite sure here on what let's see here. I just noticed, look how that's Milford City Council proposed amendments to city charter. I'm certainly not the person to be the grammar police, but in a style book, there's things like for a real newspaper, there'd be things like how you capitalize in headlines and stuff. But look at the headline right below it: 4 Bethel residents charged. So it's got capitals all over the place. Ferrets, 7 and ferrets is capitalized. So it's not, Milford City Council, that's a body, but this is the Sun. You might want to get a style book, Sun. I don't know if they still do it, but the AP has a style book that is about the notion of when you have a newspaper, you do certain things consistently in that paper, like how you do headlines. Okay, so now this story about the dogs. By the way, there's 2 stories that are not in here anywhere that I think should have been in this week. And one of those 2 stories is there's nothing, I don't think there's anything on Frontier Days. And I think that would have been in this edition, like a rundown on Frontier Days and pictures. And there's nothing on the West Clermont Superintendent Natasha Adams resigning, I don't think. Let's see if we find something I missed in here, and that should have been here. Don't you think it's much more newsworthy that the superintendent, after getting crushed at the polls 83 to 17%, resigns as superintendent of the largest district in the county? So, Megan and the Sun team, West Clermont's the largest district in the county. So you might want to, when something big happens, you might want to cover it versus a story about how you're going to have a story. Okay, on these animals, this is a horrible situation. I wonder how much this goes on in our county. It's repulsive, and I'm actually gonna dig into it a little bit. I see they put the address of where this happened, and so forth. I'm gonna try to figure out and understand this. Look, how do people live like this? Look at this. Look at the pictures here. Now, these are all provided pictures. So Megan, I bet you didn't do anything herself. There is a quote. Let me jump back here from Kiera Schwartz, who's the shelter director now, and she's going to be proud of the team. It's very professional quotes, very professional quotes. Remember, Kiera, I think it's actually newsworthy that Kiera Schwartz offered to do an interview with me and then got cock blocked by the commissioners that she's not allowed to do an interview. I mean, what kind of autonomy does she have? So I want to get the second part of this article because yeah, okay, down here, you know, her quote's very professional. I don't know. I bet you she didn't actually talk to Megan Alley because Megan Alley doesn't seem to talk to anybody. She might have sent her email asking for a quote. Um, so she talks about kennel administration, very professional quote, from consistently following proper kennel procedures to making quick, effective decisions and working tirelessly to get dogs in homes. Da 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 da. So I would have really looked forward to interviewing Kiera. By the way, here's the 5 things I would have asked her about. I would have wanted to focus on an interview. One is, these are not in order, probably. I just jotted down before this. Cats. Are we ever going to bring back cats? Fundraising. What's her vision on, David Painter's idiotic plan to make the shelter government cost the county almost $1 million a year in fundraising that they lost from private sources, thus making it cost way more for the taxpayers. I've asked her about her vision on facility location and the PTSD caused by dogs being proximate to gunfire at all times. Not at all times, but when that range is getting used in a bad situation, because you don't want the sheriff's office to be curtailing the use of that range because of the dog shelter being there. At the same token, you don't want the gun range to be PTSD and all the dogs. Okay, I want to ask her about her contract and her autonomy. I've requested her contract and her personnel file because her not being allowed, she wasn't even allowed to respond to me that she couldn't do an interview. The county PR person responded to me, which tells me if I were her, I'd be feeling like, whoa, like do I have any real authority or autonomy? So I'm interested. Anybody in their right mind, knowing the history of Clermont County, that was going to take that job would have wanted to negotiate a contract that gave them a great degree of autonomy, that they can't be micromanaged by Diamond Dave Painter, who knows nothing about animals, and from everything I've heard, absolutely hates cats. And then I would ask her about RFP 2. Shouldn't there be another RFP around this? Because I don't think you're ever going to. I don't think you're ever going to get the fundraising back unless you enter into, at a minimum, a relationship with a humane society that's positive and productive. And the shelter has run people out of there. And I don't know, Kiera, I did figure out that, so Carolyn Evans ran the shelter under uh, Claremont Cares. They now run the Hamilton County Shelter, a much bigger operation. By all accounts, although Diamond Dave tried to demonize them, that they created a rat infestation or something, which was totally bullshit. They did an excellent job running the place. They did $1 million of fundraising a year. But Kiera never reached out to them. And I'll remind Kiera again, 2 of the 3 directors for Hamilton County Cares, live in Clermont County and have repeatedly offered to help on their own time and on their own dime with improving and modernizing the shelter procedures in Clermont County. But I can't believe Kiera. I mean, she seems young. I believe she's relatively inexperienced in reality. And it was a foolish move not to reach out to prior operators to understand what were the issues. If you're going to take a job in a shelter that's been routinely featured in the press again and again for all of its malfeasance and issues, I think you would want to talk to the people that ran it previously about what you're going to be up against when you get in there. So I'd encourage Kiera to still do that. I have Carolyn Evans' number. Kiera, contact me. I'll give it to you. Reach out and see if also the 2 directors that have kept offering help on medical and other fronts, maybe you should talk to them. I think one of the things that Kiera should be doing is saying, we're going to have a reset at the shelter, a reset with volunteers, a reset with the community. I don't know that this young woman understands that it is a recovery project because the thing has been a disaster for so long. Okay, let's go back to the paper, page 2, about transportation awards for seniors and people with disabilities. I want to just mention here, it says 2 million. Some of these, it has a big list in here of all the people that got these different grants. But one of them is Clermont County. What is it called here? It's Clermont Senior Services. Clermont Senior Services. So they got $293,540. I read an article a while ago about some innovative governments that have gotten away from having their own little transportation setups and just use Uber. Just use Uber, and they can actually, like Uber, I guess, has a way that they actually do a subcontract thing. So if you wanted to have Uber stops, like for the CTC buses that go downtown, if instead you wanted to have Ubers pick people up at those stops where the bus stops are, but what I read in the article is that in many cases it's cheaper to just pay Uber to take people around than it is to have the bloated bureaucracies of these governmental systems. So at $20 Ubers, 293,540 would cover 14,000 rides. If those rides typically involve two people because those are typically done ride share. I just want to I like to raise points in the spirit of Elon Musk of look at this breakdown of all this money into these little grants. I think is probably a lot of inefficiency, and a lot of that money gets spent on overhead to administer versus the actual program. Okay, we got Jungle Jim's Craft Beer Festival coming up, submitted by Jungle Jim's 18th annual Craft Beer Festival. Man, doesn't time fly? Remember when Jungle Jim's being there was evil, and the Tea Party was energized around it. We got to stop Jungle Jim's. As I point out, I'm against government in the private sector on one hand, but I'm not against economic development where it makes sense. And I've with Ken Geis, I've repeatedly had the discussion with him where the key elements to good economic development are that it creates notable new jobs, it creates a significant increase in property values that's taxable, and it pays for public infrastructure that otherwise would not be affordable. So a lot of the projects in Union Township under Ken Geis had all three of those: jobs, public infrastructure, increase in property values that would be taxable. Now, I don't think that Jungle Gyms, I think that's a Port Authority owned, so there's taxes. I think there is tax. I don't know how it works because they talk about Jungle Gyms having to pay the tax. There might be Port Authority financing, but so good economic development. Turns out I would like the Tea Party people to send a letter of apology. Ted Steveno, if you're still alive out there, how about a letter of apology to Ken Geis on the Jungle Gyms? Because we're getting up on the 18th annual Craft Beer Festival. Maybe you and Ken Geis get together with me for a beer at the Jungle Gyms Craft Beer Festival and talk about how it ultimately worked out very well, what was done there, and what are the factors that are good economic development versus bad economic development. Okay, let's try to power through here. There's a story on a flag retirement ceremony. Nothing again. I'm all for flag retirement ceremonies. I don't know that it's page 2 news in Clermont County. Page 2 news, weren't there there's nothing else going on. No arrest, no nothing. Flag Day ceremony, flag retirement ceremony. That's the page 2 news. Nothing against it. All for flags, all for Flag Day ceremonies, all for proper disposal of flags. So, a lot of times there's a receptacle at the prosecutor's office in Batavia for flags, and like the American Legion Post almost always have a receptacle. The one in Union Township has a receptacle. It's kind of in the back room past the bar, but don't just throw your flags in the trash. Bring them to do proper disposal. Okay, let's go to page 3, community calendar. I think this is funny. I went to the Clermont County Park Board meeting. Let's see if the Sun has an article on the Clermont County Park Board meeting next week. But here's what's funny. Their community calendar has the Clermont County Park Board, which was at noontime on June 5th. Well, this paper was released on June 5th. Okay, so who the hell is going to the community calendar? First off, you would never get it by noontime, this paper on the 5th. Okay, so if you get it at home, it's mailed. Okay, and so it just gives an example of this filler that doesn't properly take into consideration when people are even going to get this. Some article about the sales tax holiday. Again, a typical Megan Alley article requires no engagement with the community whatsoever, no knowledge of the community whatsoever, no nothing. Just that maybe she's getting better though. Maybe she's taking press releases and trying to make them her own a little bit. I've encouraged her that when you get a press release, you could ask yourself, what are some questions I could ask to a local official about this particular topic to make it more localized, which she seems to be too lazy to do. But I'm actually not a fan of these sales tax holiday things. All these gimmicky things. And by the way, this might come as a shock. I'm wearing a Trump hat. I'm not a fan of no tax on tips. Okay. I'm not a fan of no tax on overtime. All that's going to do is create incentives for people to move compensation to be more tip based. Okay. Because theoretically, you're going to save taxes. And now I'm the employer say, hey, we're going to reduce your pay to a minimum because, your tips aren't taxable. And that's just gimmicks. That is just gimmicks, and I'm actually not for it. And if I were talking to Trump, I would be like, I get it that these gimmicks, but they're not good. And I think a sales tax holiday is a gimmick. It's not fair. It's not just. It's not even. It's just a pandering move. It's a political pandering move to have these things. How about this notion? Instead of having sales tax holidays, why don't we have a Clermont County Doge, cut expenses, and reduce the county portion of the sales tax permanently? Permanently. Okay. So, but no, none of our political people want to do that because the notion of cutting expense or becoming more efficient, that scares the hell out of them. Okay, so here's an opinion page. We have an article from John Becker, which is basically a recap of the Union Township newsletter. So everybody in Union Township gets a newsletter. But you get a newsletter in the mail. So this article is just a recap of the newsletter. So it's really a sleeves out of the vest thing, because if you live in Union Township, you get all this in a newsletter. Okay. And then, but I guess if you live in other townships, you can take advantage of these things. I think that, it's pretty obvious. I'm gonna make this as a joke here, that Union Township is just way ahead of Miami Township. And having, what? We're also Union Township, where I live, is also ahead of Miami Township. Affordable housing. Okay. And but anyway, John Becker, there. We've got John, God love him, has got some more articles about veterans and money, all for veterans. But this guy, this episode of the Sun, he gets 2 articles. So this John guy just, I guess, is like a paid reporter. It's like it's just filler at some point. It's just filler to have this guy. He's over the last 3 weeks, I think he'd be averaging 2 articles per week, 2 editorials per week from the same guy on veterans issues. All for veterans issues. But aren't there other issues in Clermont County than this? It just shows you how dead carcass this thing is, that's what they need to use. All right, there's usually a DAV. I'm all for the DAV. I'm all for the DAV getting these things published. But I think I don't know. I got to go back and look. But the DAV's always got like stuff. A lot of times, I don't know if it's the same chapters. But we got Amelia, veteran recipient of DAV Volunteer Month Award. Let's net this out, okay? All for this guy. Way to go! Great job, Chris Garner. But Natasha Adams, the superintendent of West Clermont, resigning on, I think it was May 22nd, is not a news story. But that Chris Garner got the Volunteer of the Month award for the DAV is a news story. Okay, now watch me find at the end that there is a Natasha Adams story, but I don't think there is. I'll go through and read this beforehand. And then we've got down here about somehow you can get money for something. I don't know. A lot of stuff in here that's not, it's like, here's a great example. Okay, so they put in here, like, here's a list of all the counties. Okay, just filler, just complete filler. Let's just have a list of the counties, okay? There's about the sales tax thing, some more. Then we've got my man, Jake Dowling, with always a really good job at the sports section. And, look at the photos, and all the photos. I know I'm a broken record, but almost all the photos are taken by Jake Dowling. So he's out at these events. He's in the community. Megan Alley, I think she lives in Indian Hill, and she's writing the paper from Indian Hill or something. I know they have some sort of office in Williamsburg. The office in Batavia is long gone. But Jake Dowling, he's always got like 2 to 4. Probably the average is 3.5 to 4 pages of good content. So you've got here 1, 2, a lot of action photos, and then we've got the payola. We got some classifieds. We got the government payola, which should be eliminated. We should eliminate that This is the stuff where they have to have it's a vestige of where the government has to run ads in what's called a paper of record. And so they have to run these ads. It's in the statute, and it becomes payola for these dink newspapers. But it also becomes a control, because now, since the government is the primary funder of the paper through these ads, overpriced legal ads, the paper can't do much to the government when the government has an option, because, as I've said before, the government could just go and run them in the Enquirer for a couple months, drive the Sun out of business, and then go, all right, what are we going to do now? Okay, so there's some actual real ads in here, blah, blah, blah. Let me go back to full page view and more on Jake Dowling. So how many pages was that of good sports content? 1, 2. Look at that. There's an ad about athlete of the week, but it's still sports content. So basically full pages. 1, 2. Then I'll skip past these. 3, okay, pages of sports content. 4 pages of sports content. So again, hats off to Jake Dowling. Again, maybe that's the strategy of the paper, is they don't care about news, and they're just going to phone it in with a bunch of press releases on actual news or on things that are insightful. But when you miss big things like the superintendent of the largest district in the county resigns office after getting shellacked, by the way, I'm sad about that. I felt like Natasha Adams made a lot of mistakes. One of them is by thinking that Clermont County hanging out with the Chamber of Commerce twerp class would help her be successful, and it won't. I'm not saying you shouldn't have something to do with them. I just think that they are very disconnected. As we know, people like Andrew McAfee, they don't even live in Clermont County. It's a Hamilton County transplant operation within. Remember, the prior head of the chamber, Matt, what was his name? He was from Hamilton County. It's like a turn us into Hamilton County operation. But she did that. She was always not unfriendly to me, Natasha Adams, but she was generally dismissive, and I think her inability to engage with more grassroots groups was a very bad aspect. All that being said, I think that she was the best superintendent West Clermont has had in as long as I've ever been paying attention to superintendents. So I think it'll be it's a tough situation on the schools right now for what they're going to do. My understanding is, and Megan should have been on this. As my understanding, they already have a replacement candidate, and that could have been in the paper too, or they've already hired a replacement or something. But nothing from Megan. Okay, now it is time for the most valuable part of the Clermont Sun, which is the Jungle Gym Day. Again, Jungle Gym. Their ad is in the one at newsstands. I assume it's in the is in the one that is mailed, but it's not in the online edition. If I was Jungle, I'd be like, why the hell isn't my ad that I'm paying for in the online edition of the paper? I add it manually. But if you buy it at the newsstand, I think if you get it mailed, you get the Jungle Gym's ad, which is excellent content. All right, let's see what Jungle Gym's got going on this week. Again, Jungle Gyms doesn't pay me for doing this. If they ever wanted to, they don't need to. It's okay. but we got 4 for $10 Pepsi. The only thing I don't like here is I wish it would say whether it's just Pepsi or Pepsi brands, okay? Because if they had 4 for $10 Mountain Dews, I'm over there right now. I'm getting in the car, okay? But Pepsi, I'm not too big on it. But I don't know whether that's specific or not. I'm assuming it's specific to just Pepsi or 7-Up, but that's a great deal right there. That's a great deal, isn't it? 4 for $10, okay? And okay, so we got, again, beautiful meats from Jungle Gyms, as always. Probably the preeminent place to get not only, regional, ethnic, national cuisine, but great meat and things that you can't find at other places. Ribs. I'm not a fan of ribs. Everybody I know in my family loves ribs. I'm the guy that orders something different, Montgomery than ribs. Hot dogs, got beef Oscarmayer, $3.99 for both the bun. Looks like both the bun length and the regular, so that's a good deal. You can pick what you like there. And some other sausage things, some fish. like I jokingly said on one of these before, I've successfully avoided in traveling in Asia forever to ever be served a fish with the head still on it, and I'm going to try to keep that true for my entire life. And some produce stuff down here, deli stuff, some Jungle Gyms, things like macaroni salad. I keep saying I'm going to get some of this Jungle Gym stuff to try it out. That's their own brand, house brand. I have not done that. I should. Cheez-Its. They always have Cheez-Its. I love Cheez-Its, by the way. I love Cheez-Its, you know. I also love goldfish, but I think Cheez-Its a lot of times are cheaper than goldfish for the same quantity. The Ritz snack packs, I'm a huge buster outer of Rick's snack, not the snack packs. What are these? Snack packs. Okay. I don't know. I like the thing that's little tubes of like 12 crackers so you can make yourself some cheese and crackers and don't have to open up a whole big one long sleeve of Ritz crackers. We've got some syrup. Let's see. I'm almost getting to the booze section here at the very end. Let's see what they got there. Dairy and frozen. I don't know what Perry's ice cream is. I wonder if that's any good. $5.99 for Perry's ice cream. Pizza party. I don't know what that is too. I'm gonna go over there and try to get some of this. I used to love bagel bites. I haven't had bagel bites forever. So those are $2.49. Maybe I got to run over there and get some bagel bites. Just you see sometimes things in these ads. One of the benefits of looking at these ads is you see stuff that you otherwise would not have. You don't even think about. Like I used to eat when I was younger. I'd love having bagel bites. Having people over, whipping up a tray of bagel bites. Good stuff. And I haven't had them forever. You ever sit back? Sometimes I sit back and say, I wonder when the last time was that I had a bagel. Or I think, now that I'm getting close, I'll be 60 this year, is I sit back and say, like, when I was a teenager, I played Dungeons and Dragons. I wonder when the last time was that I played Dungeons and Dragons. Did I know it was going to be the last time? When I walked out of somebody's house with my Dungeons and Dragons books, did I know I was never going to play Dungeons and Dragons again? So anyway, makes you think, but I maybe get some bagel bites. I don't know if that's a good price, but I'm assuming it's a good price. Bakery stuff. Again, I want to get over there. Maybe next time I go over there, I get beer over there for us. I gotta make myself go and get some of these things like the macaroni salad and some of these other Jungle Gyms things. I bet you they're really good. Remember, seniors save 5% every Wednesday. On their website, when I checked, it said you should have a Golden Buckeye card to get that deal. And we always have the different stuff from different parts of the world. Specialty, fun toys and collectibles. What is Spin Master? I don't know what that is. I'm probably happy I don't know what Spin Master PlayStation is. I don't want to know. Some other toys. I don't know what these things are. Some weird pop stuff. And then some teas. Butterscotch beer. I wonder if that's good. I love butterscotch. I don't know what that is, but it's one bottle's $1.49. If they have them chilled, maybe I'll drink one in the car. I probably get pulled over like for looking like I'm drinking a beer in the car because of the way that bottle is. But I think that's a non-alcoholic beverage. And then finally, beer and wine. If I could just get my wife to drink Natty Light, I could save money. We could save money. That might be throwing my wife under the bus, because I joke with her about man, if you would just drink Keystone, we could save some money in this house. So, but we're a Miller Lite family. So that is the Clermont Sun for June 5th edition. June 5th edition of the Clermont Sun. And we'll all be looking forward to the actual article on Milford. You should get a complimentary copy of the next edition if you bought it at newsstand, so you can actually see the article on what the headline was. And maybe next time, Megan and team, maybe you should have something on Frontier Days that you seem to have missed. I think you missed. Was it in last week? And on the West Clermont superintendent resigning. And, there's actual other stuff. I wish I did a better job at mentally taking down notes of things that should be here. They also, by the way, did you notice they didn't have any Memorial Day stuff? I think this would have been the issue where they would have had, recaps of. No, I think they had something. Maybe they had something on the Memorial Day issue in the week before. So I take that back. But any event, that's the Clermont Sun for the June 5th edition on Saturday, June 7th. Thank you.